which is the publisher of branded bestseller, Life Lessons from Cancer, Dr. Keen Babbage and Laura Babbage. And so, along with those two today, you can read all about them in the book, and you can purchase the book outside, and then once we're finished here, you come across the stage and they'll sign it for you. And so, also, very honored to have Dr. Marcus Rambo here with us. You are the chair of the Department of Radiation. And fellow, your biography is like 3 pages long. I couldn't get it on here. But anyway, I'm going to moderate essentially an informal type of discussion, more or less. We will throw questions back and forth, and then when we're finished, we'll take questions from people in the audience. So my first question will be to Keen and to Laura. How did you feel the day you got the news, Keen? How did you feel, Laura, as his sister-in-law?
October 12th, 2010 was already a difficult day because my mother's health was declining seriously and we knew that she was dying. We met, my brother, my sister-in-law and I met with doctors at the Markey Cancer Center, and they said, Keen, you have cancer. Sinus cancer, very rare. It was very aggressive, very serious. We got that information, and the conclusion was, what do we do? What action do we take? And it was Dr. Arnold who said, we knew you'd want to get started quickly, so we've scheduled you for chemotherapy for 2 days from now. The change in how you live your life had to begin immediately because cancer, we've learned, declares war. It's not a battle, it's a war. And cancer acts in every way it can to destroy you. You have to act in more aggressive ways to destroy it. So the news, Don, came after enough tests that we realized something was very serious. And then we found out how serious it was. But the people here at UK were equally serious and thoroughly prepared and as encouraging and kind as possible. It means so much to us to have had the treatment at UK and to be here today at UK. 3 out of my 4 grandparents went to UK. My mother and father met at UK, which is very, very important to me. And my brother and sister-in-law have a degree from the Patterson School. My doctorate's from UK. So this is part of our home to begin with. But Don, that day was a difficult day, made manageable by the people here. It amazed me that we spent the whole day here at UK meeting with doctors whose schedules must have already been very busy, but they found time and they found a place and they found a way to meet one more cancer patient who needed all the help they could provide. And of course, for our family, it was doubly difficult because my mother's health was declining so much. But it was a time when, as a family, we just had to team up even more emphatically and lovingly and address the new reality we were facing.
Laura?
Well, we knew something very dramatic was wrong because Keen had already had the biopsy, so we knew that when we went to see Dr. Arnold that particular day that it wouldn't be good news. We just didn't know how bad it would be. So that afternoon, after we asked all the questions, for those of you who know Keen, you know that he is the master question asker. And I have learned so much from him. I don't even go to my doctor anymore without my own list. So this book includes lists of questions and things that I would not have thought to ask. And of course, as we went through the process, we learned more and more what to ask. But that afternoon, as Keen said, Nana was getting sicker and she knew she was dying. And by this point, they were doing comfort care for her. And I remember that weekend, Keen had just finished up his first round of chemotherapy, his 3rd day of chemotherapy, and we went to the hospital. And I remember holding Nana in my arms, and I promised her that I would take as good a care as Keen as she would have if she could. And of course, we never told Nana that Keen had cancer, but I think somewhere in there she must have known. And when she died, Keen and I were back at home. He was resting, and he looked up at me from the chair after Bob had called, and he said, just with tears streaming down his face, he said, "She waited until I finished my first round of chemotherapy." And I said, "Yes, she did." So we have felt as if Nana has walked with us through this whole experience, and so it was not easy. But Keen is very funny and always made most of our time together pretty enjoyable in the midst of such dire news.
I want to ask Dr. Randall on the same line. One is, what's it like in your job when you have to tell someone they have cancer? And secondly, the patient's attitude, and if they're, how much is that a difference in whether or not they're flat going to make it? So.
The first thing, I want to be honest about the fact that I was not Keen's doctor. I'm honored to be here on stage with him. I was Keen's companion in a way through his treatment because Laura and I had become friends, and so when this diagnosis came for Keen, we sort of reconnected, and I had some opportunities to help, I think, or hope in some way. So I'm not the one that gave that diagnosis, although I've given bad news plenty of times, and I think if you are a cancer physician, I think that you understand that process well enough, and that you very likely have enough compassion. The patient and hopefully the family understand that it's not something that you're not doing it with joy or glee, but you're doing it because it's necessary. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is to be realistic about the diagnosis and sort of what's coming down the road from there.
That makes sense. A lot of this book it's focused on both Keen and Laura, and I'm going to start with Laura on this one. Actually, if you go on Amazon right now, the #1 book in doctor-patient relations is this book, Life Lessons from Cancer. And I think one of the reasons is being a caregiver. And Laura, a couple of things on that line. One is the fact that your sister-in-law, and I'm not sure my sister-in-law would send me a card if I was in the hospital. I mean, it might be 50-50. Let alone decide that I'm going to, devote my life essentially to doing that. So, one, what's that like to be the caregiver? Secondly, I think, I guess my own experience when my father had died of prostate cancer, which is one of the reasons Keen and Laura came to me as to be their publisher, was they knew my own background. And I never felt like, I want to take care of Dad, but there are days when I want somebody to take care of me too. So explain, were you in that? How'd that work for you? Explain what.
And I think that's true. I think, we had many caregivers, first of all. We had many people in this room were there for Keen, spent time, sat with him in the hospital, brought food, took care of all of us. And I think one of the primary things that I've learned as a caregiver is the caregiver needs care as well. And so what we really learned is that there are circles of people who care for not only the patient, but the people who care for the patient and the people who care for those folks. And when you have a community like that, it's not overwhelming. And I think as a caregiver too, one of the things that I really had to learn a lot more about was how you set boundaries. My family, we had made plans every year to go to Florida for Thanksgiving, and when Keen was in the midst of treatment, I said to my family, well, of course I'm going to stay here. And so I packed up everybody and I drove them to the airport, and it was only at that moment that I realized how difficult it was to be separated from the rest of our family. So I think part of what I've learned through this process is that caregivers also need to recognize where where their limits are and how they need to be fed and cared for. So I guess that was a good life lesson for me.
Yeah, and so Keen, you know, I guess you're lucky to have a caregiver like her, but you knew her personality well enough to suspect that that's how she's going to react, right?
If you look at Laura's resume, you'll see experience as a nurse, as a healthcare administrator, executive, and then chaplain work. The first day we were in chemotherapy, we started making a lot of phone calls. Who can we call? Every church in town that we knew anybody associated with, we called and said, Keen needs your encouragement. Please pray for Keen. There's a prayer network that gets established. We got to know the people here at UK very, very well. And so many of you, thank you for being here tonight, but thank you for being there during those most difficult weeks of cancer treatment. There was one day when the doctor said to me, Keen, we need to admit you to the hospital here at Markey. It'll be a 23-hour stay. And it became a 10-day stay when the question really was, are you going to live through this or not? Doug came to visit a few times, and he always brought a book to read and never read a page of it because I kept asking questions about politics, about education. And I knew that this tumor, this massive tumor, Dr. Arnold, who did incredible work and still does, showed us on the computer screen this tumor that's right here in the sinus area and going into the eyes and going into the brain. I said, I'm a teacher, I really need my brain. And we could see that progress was being made, but we knew that this was going to be an ordeal. This was going to be truly a life or death struggle. We set up a prayer network. We've got a family network. Different family members would take me to radiation therapy, 7:30 in the morning. And there was one day when my nephew Brian, who's here, took me, and they showed him the screen, and he could see, Keen, the tumor's shrinking. Well, hallelujah, we could give thanks about that. There were times when Bob and I would discuss our family, and the priority clearly that Bob and Laura and Brian, Julie, my niece, Robert, my other nephew, made was Keen's war against cancer. Whatever else is going on, that has to be the top priority. And the people at UK communicated the same thing, whether it was the first day in chemotherapy, and Roger Yankee, who's been so supportive, and he and his wife are the parents of students who I knew when I worked at Bryan Station Middle School. To walk into Markey to get chemotherapy the first day, and there's a friendly face, a familiar face, meant so very much. One of the life lessons we learned on was put together a network and never let go. Alone is limited, together is unlimited, and it became obvious to me that I needed every bit of support I could get. We set up a prayer network, we set up a family network, a family system. Even the dog Rudy got involved because there were a number of nights when I needed to spend the night at Bob and Laura's house, and getting up the stairs was sometimes not easy as radiation takes its toll. And I'd lie down on the sofa downstairs, and Rudy just knew Uncle Keen needs some help, and he'd jump up at the foot of that sofa and spend time with me just to keep an eye on me and just to offer encouragement, just like our family did. Radiation, I was told, would accumulate. And the first week or so, I'd just run into the radiation room trying to encourage everybody who was there and thank them for the work they were doing. Second week, my pace was a little bit slower. Day 12, I could barely walk in. And that's when you realize this war has just intensified. But thanks be to God, with the support of faith, family, and friends, and the experts here, we were making progress. Now, I lost a lot of weight. I didn't weigh all that much to start with. I've been a runner for years. Well, I was. Now I walk. Cancer has an impact. But thanks be to God, I can still get on the treadmill occasionally and do about 25 miles at a slow pace. One of the life lessons in the book that we talk about is there's much to be thankful for. There was a time when I used to run 6 or 8 miles. I can't do that anymore, but I can still get on the treadmill. There was a time when I had to miss 4.5 months of school. I never missed school. Cancer takes me out of school for 4.5 months, but I got back to teaching. I was there today. And there was a time when there was a vicious, aggressive, brutal tumor in this area, attacking the eyes, attacking the brain. And it's not there anymore. And I can demonstrate one other change that's occurred, something to be thankful for. There were days when I could not drink a drop of water, could not eat anything. And I was dropping in weight. It started at 175, it got down to 140. But hallelujah, rejoice. There was a day when this couldn't be done, and now it can happen. So there is much to be thankful for.
There's a part in the book very much like that, where Keene, the night before, it says, he sat down to a plate of eggs, determined to eat, willing himself to eat. But finally, with tears streaming down his face, he said, "You wouldn't think it would be so difficult. I just can't do it." And that was the day when he stopped eating and stopped drinking. And that was right before he started his 23-hour stay that lasted for 10 days. And his willingness to persevere. And I think Dr. Arnold, who is here, talked about Keene being a hero, and truly the heroic way in which he demonstrated his willingness to fight and to not give up was an inspiration to all of us.
There was one pastor who came to visit among many pastors and church members and family and friends. One pastor came to visit one day during that 10-day time in the hospital. And as he was leaving, I got up and I said to him, "I'm at my limit." And as soon as I said those words, I didn't like the way they sounded. I said, "Keene, you can't be at your limit because cancer's not at its limit. You've got to fight back and dig down deeper and remove all of the limits that may have existed previously. And so you seek more help and you receive more help and you do ask more questions." My doctorate's from the College of Education here at UK, but I think I've asked enough questions in the last 3 years to earn an honorary degree. If there is some certification that you have to pass a test for, I think I'm real close to being ready to do that.
You think you want to add?
Dr. Arnold, did you want to contribute?
I'm going to say one thing because I don't want to.
Oh, no.
Come on up, come on up.
Come on up, it's an honor to have you.
Ron Moran, because I'm standing in awe of a hero up there on the stage. So, Keene, one of the things that I know about you is that although you felt like you hit the wall, you were very, very brave through all of it, very heroic, but you never, ever stopped doing whatever we asked. You never gave up, but you also didn't stop doing, even on the day you got admitted and you felt the lowest that you've ever felt. You sat in that room and said, "Well, what's next? What do we do?" And that made us go, "Okay, he's not done." And that's what got you through this, is that fighting tenacious spirit.
Can I ask both doctors this question? How often does that happen, and how often do people just ignore your advice? Or kind of do it, or sort of do it?
Ignoring the advice
Yeah.
is simply not being able to take the next step.
Okay.
Or carry on, and he didn't have that. And I think surrounding yourself with the faith community and family is a really important part of it.
Right.
There's also a point where you get inside of you where you go, "Is this it? Or am I going to take the next step?" And there we've seen people have a mark that simply can't do it.
Yeah.
They just can't go another step. And Keene said, "I'm Iron Man."
I agree. I think part of it was Keene's inner drive to continue, and certainly not everyone has that. And the other thing is he had the support around him, and unfortunately not everybody has that. So I think Dr. Arnold hit it on the head.
I want to hit something that comes up in the book. Keene, I mean, there's the cover for the book. Adam Turner, stand up way back there, edited, designed, published. He's edited 5 best-selling books and he's 22 years old, so not a bad run. So he'll be at 1,540 by the time you're my age. But this is Keene doing something very unique, and you'll see it in the pictures in the book and the ones that are flashing on screen. Walked with a baseball in 1980, went from St. Louis to Cincinnati to start the Cincinnati Reds in the 1980 season. And I was a junior in college at that point, but Keene, Bob and I were already close friends, and so in Larson's high school, so I followed this story, but everybody did. It was a day in, day out headline story. And what it told me about him, a guy walks 420 miles, takes care of himself. You've always hit all, you know, I guess part of the thing is, when do you ever think, oh, gee, it wasn't fair? I've always been healthy. And so, how does that factor into your attitude about things?
My response was very objective. The first job I had right out of college was to work in Cincinnati for the Procter & Gamble company, terrific company. And they taught us how to do our job in many ways, including by giving us more than you can do, so we'd have to figure out how to get all that done. The walk from Cincinnati was another example of just figuring out what you have to do every day and taking those steps one at a time. You don't take a walk from Cincinnati, or rather from St. Louis to Cincinnati in 1980, because there may be a day when cancer attacks you and you want to feel as though you've lived your life as fully as possible. But of the emotions that I felt through the whole process with cancer, at the top of the list for me was regret. That at age 56, the life's work that I had intended for myself might not be finished. One of my former students, Rachel, is here. We used to have first period U.S. history class together at Henry Clay High School. That was something that always inspired me, to get up every morning, to go teach as effectively as possible, and to do it in the best way that I could manage, which usually meant work a little bit more, get up earlier, stay up later. My approach to cancer was the same. Take the advice, take the guidance of experts who are so good in their career of working with cancer patients against this wicked disease. Hold on to family members and friends and faith, and remember that cancer is going to act in every aggressive way it can. So take all you've got and all that everybody else has and put that together and make the most effective counteroffensive possible.
I think the other thing that Keene did, and I think people who tend to get through some of the most difficult diagnoses or situations in life are those who are able to set goals for themselves after the cancer. What will I do after I get better? And so Keene, when he was staying at our house, I found a note card one day, and on it was a list of things that I guess that he wanted to do when he got better. So one of them was to run in the Bluegrass 10,000. And he was diagnosed in October, and he wanted to run it the following July. And we talked about that, and I don't think any of us were ever as optimistic as Keene after seeing how sick he was. And yet, when his last chemo and radiation treatment finished in January of 2011, we had a goal to run in the Bluegrass 10,000. Well, we didn't run, but we did walk, and we did finish it. We were about 200 yards out, or maybe a little more than that, and Keene said, "Hey, you want to run to the finish line?" I was like, I'm not sure I can do that. But sure enough, he could do it, so we did it. And so that's one of the pictures on the back of the book is, you know, he had a goal, and by golly, no matter what, he was going to do that. And to me, and to all of our family, and to people who know him, it was such an inspiring way to live your life and to say, I am going to do this. So we did it. Our whole family did it. But Keene was definitely the leader of the pack. So having goals was a big thing.
In January of 2011, I talked to Dr. Arnold and said, when can I go back to school? Going back to school meant I wasn't sick anymore. If I could go back to work, I was doing better. And we agreed on a day in late January when I could go to Henry Clay High School and teach one class in the morning. And that year it was first period political science class. Well, there I am. I always wear Andy Longani suits. Andy takes great care of me. I don't know anything about how that is done except wear what Andy tells me to wear. And it always matches and it always looks good. The suit, however, was designed for me when I weighed 175 pounds. There I am weighing 140 pounds. But I figured the students aren't going to recognize me. The hair's gone because of chemotherapy. 35 pounds are gone. I've got to wear one of these suits. They know the teacher who always wears a suit. So put on the suit, went to first period political science class, taught it, which was so encouraging to me. He said, all right, Keen, you can still do that. One of the doctors told me that the radiation field had affected the brain. He said it affected partly the area of the brain that's responsible for memory and the area of the brain that's responsible for social interaction. So if I see you and I don't remember your name, that's why. I have an explanation. And if you think my people skills have declined some, the radiation took them away from me.
Yeah.
But the radiation chemotherapy also attacked that tumor. So there's some trade-offs that you learn to live with. Setting the goal to be in the Bluegrass 10,000 meant I could do something that I'd always done. Getting back to teach meant I could do something that I had always done. So setting those manageable, practical goals that showed we did remove the limits, didn't we? And now we can live a way that is going to have some connection with the way prior to cancer.
But just to show you, Keen has such a great sense of humor. It was early on in chemotherapy, and there's this thing called chemo brain, so which means that you become forgetful because of the chemo. And we were talking about something, of course, I couldn't remember. I said, Keen, I think the only person affected by chemo brain is me. He looked at me and he said, I said, what are we going to do if you get it? He said, who will know? There was another time he was at the house, I was convinced he was cold. You know, I'm such a mother, you know. Keen, you have to be cold. Laura, I'm not cold. Well, how about if I get you a blanket? I don't need a blanket. So I feel his forehead and I said, oh my goodness, Keen, you're actually hot. And he said, why, thank you very much. So, I mean, there was almost never a time that in the midst of so much pain and heartache and difficulty, he found a way to make us all laugh. So I think laughter is just some of the best medicine that you can have, and certainly Keen's personality lends itself to that.
Well, I want to talk about something, another part of your personality is the fact that you're the ultimate teacher. I wrote a piece for Huffington Post and about the book last week, but I compared you to Walt White. If you're familiar with the show Breaking Bad, the television, and you know, he found out he had cancer and became a meth dealer, and wanted to make money, he wanted to get rich. Keen found out he had cancer, and all he could do was to get back to the classroom. The primary reason, the easiest negotiation I've ever had on a book, he said, I just want to teach people about my story. So came to me and said, well, we need to talk through the royalties. Oh, okay. I just want to teach people about my story. I want to get my word out. I want to use my cancer as a teaching mechanism. I've had numerous people write a call this week as this has been set up and say, Keen is the greatest teacher I ever had. Keen is the greatest teacher my child ever had. And this isn't in the book. I'm curious because I think it's part of who you are. You gave up a high-powered career, a PhD, to become a teacher. And why did that happen, and how does that, I guess that fire must still be burning, and how did that inspire you getting out of the bed and coming back to the classroom?
The 4 years of the Procter & Gamble company were terrific. It's an outstanding company, and I learned so much about business, about leadership, about management, about time management. I think I'm twice the educator I would have been had I not had that experience. They set a standard, and that is something I brought with me to education and brought with me to fighting cancer. At P&G, every day we had our to-do list. Well, for a long time, at the top of my to-do list was fight cancer. My students always hear me say, read more, keep reading. Advice I've given them for decades, and advice I take and follow. The students were so supportive. Some would come to the house and we'd have study sessions there on a day when I wasn't getting treatment and felt as though I could see people. It was such a joy. They would write letters to me and say, Dr. Babbage, fight more, keep fighting. And encourage me to get back to the classroom. That meant a great deal. Plus the educational aspect of what this cancer presented was something that Dr. Randall and I talked about, Dr. Arnold, Dr. Kutramati, Dr. Gal, Dr. Peterson, all of us talked about that. What can we learn from this? I went on one website that had information about cancer, and it listed the 20 most common cancers. Sinus cancer is not on the list. There's just not a whole lot of quantifiable data about it. I said, what can we do to learn from this? Is there something that this case study can provide to the knowledge we have about cancer? Can cancer patients benefit from this? Can cancer healthcare practitioners benefit from this? So the educational aspect, Don, was part of what we hoped this experience could provide to the whole community of people who fight cancer and to the people who experience cancer and their families and their friends. Part of writing this book was what we hoped to be as a source of encouragement and guidance to cancer patients, their families, friends, to the healthcare community, to chaplains, to pastors, to people who work with cancer patients. The educational work continues to fascinate me.
Yeah.
There was one book I just completed that deals with education. This morning I'm in the classroom with students who are a whole lot younger than I am. Face to face with 16-year-olds who have this fascination with electronic gadgets. And I have a fascination with old-fashioned textbooks. But we meet in the middle and we get the work done. When I was a cancer patient, Bob and Laura did everything possible for me. Julie, Brian, Robert did everything possible for me. It was my intention to be the last person on planet Earth who got one of these. I still buy stamps, write letters by hand, put the stamp on the envelope, take it to the post office, and keep in touch with people that way. There was one day Bob and Laura, two of the dearest people in the world, say to me, Keen, here's your cell phone. And I'm wondering, why are they giving me a cell phone? Teaching is more difficult when students are trying to sneak that peek at the cell phone instead of thinking with me about Jacksonian democracy and Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson. But I did learn how to use it. And even though my first impression was I will be the last person to have one of these, well, here I am with it. We've found ways to keep in touch with each other, and that was essential. The network that we built expanded, and that was essential. And when I see a student who today was asking, as we did some research in class, could I use my cell phone to check on some information for this project? My answer always would have been, absolutely no, find a book. There's some encyclopedias in the back of the room. And I could say, yes, of course. Which for students who've known me in the past would have thought, Dr. Babbage, it's not just cancer you've got, something else is wrong.
I have to digress a little bit. Can you explain, this is the 16th or 17th book that Dr. Babbage has written.
The one on education, that'll be book number 17.
Yeah, they're all been on education up to well, this is on education when you get right down to it. Yeah. But explain how you write your books.
Some of you in this audience may have an electronic device with you right now that puts you in touch with the world. And you can type on it and you can see the update from Washington, D.C. You can keep in touch with family and friends. And those are very effective devices. I write all the books I've ever written with a ballpoint pen and notebook paper. And Cindy Henderson, who is here, takes my handwriting and amazingly turns it into word processing precision. And the companies that are really good turn that into books. But what has always worked for me, Don, is writing by hand, an old-fashioned script that we learned years and years, decades ago.
They don't teach that anymore, Keen.
No.
But I do want to say that the pictures that you see were not for a book. When Keen was diagnosed, the first thing he said is, there may be a student who's going through something like this or has a parent who has been through cancer, and I want to be as open and upfront about my battle and about what I'm going through because it might help someone else. And so when we started the Caring Bridge website, he never read the posts and he didn't have a whole lot to do with it, but he allowed me to take pictures of him through all the stages of his cancer. Now, there are really not a lot of people out there who would allow their picture to be taken inside that mask that you saw him. They would put that on him and then they would staple it to the table, essentially, before his radiation treatments. But Keen is such a teacher that throughout he really said, I want to be able to share my story as openly and honestly as possible. And that's what he did. He did it when we had students over at the house. He never shied away from the hard questions. He was really very upfront with everybody about his cancer, about what he was going through. And I think that really enabled others to battle whatever they might be battling. In fact, he had a student, and you'll have to tell that story, a student who came up to him after he heard of your cancer treatment. And what did he say he was going to do as a result? If you could fight this?
Oh, a student who'd been in the habit of making average grades came up to Dr. Babbage. I'm really inspired by your war against cancer. And I decided that if you could get through that, I could work harder in school. And he said, I'm going to make better grades. Well, glory, hallelujah. And then he said, is it okay if I hug you? And I thought, how genuine, how sincere, how kind. What a moment that we could celebrate together.
Well, I think I want to end on that. And so I don't think we could do much better. We'd like to take some questions from anybody. And so just stand up and.
I went through not a similar process, but I had cancer myself, and there were a couple of times when people, they gave me journals to document things. And I never did put one thing down. At what point did you decide, I hear and I understand you said that you wanted to have pictures and this and that, but at what point did you say, I'm going to write a book?
Mm-hmm.
Was it during? Was it afterwards when you said, this would be good if we did this? At what point did you make that decision?
And there are two parts to the answer I would give. First is last February is the answer. Don's written a number of books. One is called Life Lessons from the Lottery. He's a financial expert. One's called Life Lessons from the Golf Course that he wrote with a golf professional. And when I saw that line of books was expanding, the suggestion became Life Lessons from Cancer. And through the great work that Adam's done and Don's done, an idea from last February now is something we can share with you and other people today. And there's an inspiration that I get from my mother. Mom was a saint. And when Mom was a student here at UK, she made straight A's for 4 years in every class she took. That is the standard that was set for us as students throughout our life. A few days before she died, we were talking to Mom. We were praying with Mom. And she looked up and said, if I die, do not grieve. Rejoice that I lived a good life. I find inspiration in that every time I think of that thought. So part of the reason to write a book is to apply that wisdom from my mother. To live a good life could include sharing words of hope and guidance and inspiration with other people. It's our hope that this book does that. The opportunity to team up with Laura to write a book, to work with Don and Adam, has been quite a gift. And it's our hope that the book is a gift to you and to everyone else who can benefit from it. One of the benefits of writing it a few years after the treatments that ended in January of 2011 was lessons learned since then. As I said earlier, what I thought was a battle with cancer is a forever war. This past summer, during summer vacation from school, I had 25 medical appointments. I know my way around the University of Kentucky. There's a building you can't find. I've probably been there or walked past it on my way to someplace else. But the people here are wonderful. And it always inspires me to be on this university campus, having spent years as a doctoral student and as a child when we came with our family here for certain events. It is home in so many ways. So writing the book with some years of reflection, I hope means that we can tell people what it's like to go through the cancer ordeal and war from its most difficult moments, and then to look back and see what's changed since then, and in truth, some things that won't change.
One thing I want to add, Keen, this is 3 years ago, this, I guess, the 12th, so it was Saturday, so we wanted to hit it close to 3 years ago today.
That's right.
Essentially was when you started here.
That's right.
Started here. And,
That's exactly right.
and we picked, when we started in February, we picked this day. I picked it as kind of a, I like authors to keep moving. And now with these two, they're way ahead of my schedule, but I always set some impossible date and then work towards it. But it also is a meaningful date. And so here we are in this place. And I want to bring you back in, Dr. Rand, because, you said you've been here, I guess, for Austin Med School, essentially, or
No, about 7 years.
7 years? Okay. But, to have a facility like this, which is world-class, and I think that's one where you have to almost wonder if God's watching out for you sometime that Keene lived in this town. But if you lived somewhere where they don't have a facility like this, what do people do at that point? Can't do anything.
Well, the only thing I would say is it's not just the facility. The facility is absolutely wonderful, but it's the folks, it's the people.
Well, the people are
It's
more
the,
important
it's
than
the,
nothing.
it's the Suzanne Arnolds and the Mark Evers and people like that of the world that that we get to work together. We have to get to work together daily, and
putting
it's
together
a
that
pleasure,
team.
and it's incredibly rewarding. But yeah, the facilities are great, but the people are really what make it.
Now, did you obviously, Laura, since you're chaplain, you were at the hospital here, you would have known what kind of facility. Did you have any idea what you're walking into? If it was, good, bad, and different?
Don, I did not.
No.
I'd seen a few doctors in the weeks prior to coming to UK,
Okay.
and then found out that there is this outstanding group of people and an outstanding facility right here in Lexington who are
Right.
doing world-class work.
I think there was another question
Yeah.
back here.
Yes, Dr. Gavin, first of all, let me say that you have both my sons at Bryan Station. And I can attest that you are indeed an outstanding educator.
Thank you, sir.
I was glad you raised that point because, as you know, there's been a lot of discussion the last few years about government's role and the affordability of health care. And I was going to ask you to comment on the local resources that we had here in Lexington, whether you thought they were indeed useful and helpful to you as you went through your cancer treatment.
Everything I could ask for was here during the months of treatment and is here during the years of follow-up. People are available. I know who to call. They are accessible, kind, caring, professional, qualified experts right here in Lexington who are taking care of people. And I'll talk to some other cancer patients or other people when I go to the Kentucky clinic who might be from various parts of Kentucky. This is an extraordinary resource. I mentioned to people I'm a fan of the University of Kentucky, and it has nothing to do with touchdowns or three-point shots. I'm a fan of the academic program because when I started as a doctoral student, one professor said to me, "Keene, we will work you harder than any other school ever did," which was wonderful. That was one of the reasons I was there, and they kept that promise. The only way to keep up with the workload was to get up earlier and stay up later. There was one day when Robert, Bob and Laura's oldest, was about 5 years old, and he knew I was working hard on my UK doctoral program. But he also knew that, man, I couldn't always come play as much as we'd like to. He left a phone message on my machine, 5-year-old. "Uncle Keene, I hope you have a good dissertation." My perception as a fan of UK is an incredible academic program right here in our neighborhood and an incredible healthcare facility right here in our neighborhood. The people in the College of Education make it exactly what the people in the healthcare program make this. This is a gem. This is a treasure.
I wanted to say, my brother has just been diagnosed with throat cancer. And he has gone through his radiation and his chemo. He's never been a smoker. And to know that we have worked with him through the process, and we're very thankful and church-minded family, but he is really having a hard time right now. He's really depressed. Can you just tell us what you can do to keep from being as depressed, you know, as you're going through the treatment? What did you do?
I asked one doctor what caused the cancer. And the answer I got was, Keen, it's nothing you did and nothing you didn't do. And in one way that was frustrating, because if he had told me, this may have caused it, stop doing this. This may help prevent it from coming back, start doing that. But what he was telling me was, these were out of control cells that I could not have prevented, and that was practical, realistic, straightforward. As far as coping with depression is concerned, part of what made the ultimate difference to me is to know that, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I knew I was never alone. When you are, as Laura was mentioning, in the radiation tunnel, and you've been snapped into this mask that is then adhered to the machine. And bless the hearts of those dear people who are technicians there, they'll tell you, now don't move. There's no way to move. But the radiation has to be precise. We found it a time to intensify faith, family, and friends. And we found it a time to look for small victories. Sometimes for me, a small victory is still not feeling awful. There are days I wake up and I feel bad, and I'll say, hallelujah, rejoice. I feel bad today. Because the day before I might have woken up, I feel awful. You measure some parts of life a little bit differently. And you look for what joy there could be, what hope there could be, what could be accomplished on a given day in a different way. Small victories. Hold on to what you believe. Hold on to the people you love. Eliminate every limit. Find something to look forward to that can be done. And then realize that it is done with a multitude of people. An individual might feel discouraged, depressed, regret. Surround yourself whenever possible with a lot of people. Virgil Covington, a dear friend, came to the hospital one evening. And it was almost as if a revival was starting. He prayed a prayer that heaven heard and earth rejoiced over. Now, the difference that made clearly was one to a person who has faith, but also it was one more example of someone reaching out and caring so much. Our family, dear friend Woody Harbit, would call people and say, you've got to pray for Keen. Knowing that people were doing that for me made such a difference. As we were discussing earlier, you and your family are doing so much that's right. And perhaps what's going to happen is doing even more of that. Does that make sense?
Suzanne.
You know, also say something about you. You know, you are a very private person. You may not realize that as you talk, but you had to be willing to open up and let other people help you in ways like buying cell phone for you. Talking to your doctors and asking things. So I think that's another piece of advice for you is that your family member needs to reach out to the healthcare team and towards them and name what it is. I'm depressed and I need your help. I can't do this by myself. It's okay to say those things. And I think that's probably a journey for you, wasn't it, Keith? Letting other people in.
You're exactly right. Exactly right.
I mean, it's an honor, but it's also hard.
That was an adjustment. That was a lesson that being a cancer patient taught me. There was a day when I said to Dr. Arnold these words, I'm sick of being sick and tired of being tired. And she responded. It wasn't as though, well, Keen, these things happen. It was, let's discuss that further and find out what we could do. And we would find actions we could take which could be helpful. Is it possible for me to get a little bit of exercise? Well, it's conceivable. maybe you could start off with just a little bit, something from Dr. Arnold that gave me a task I could accomplish, because cancer was knocking me out and potentially was going to be fatal. If you could do something on a given day, we took a walk in the Markey Cancer. Keen, let's see if we can walk around the hallway once. We walked around the hallway, and the people there said, "Who is that?" They never seen me standing up. And we didn't know you were so tall. But an accomplishment like that gives a reason to look for the next accomplishment. I wouldn't have thought walking around that hallway was a major achievement, but it was. So you start thinking a little bit differently about what can you do, and then what can you do a little bit beyond that. And you find hope.
Going back to your small journey, is your insurance paying enough that you didn't have to worry about money all this time?
I did a lot of accounting work. I'm not trained as an accountant, but I've never gotten so much mail as I got from all of the Times here at UK, and I still get it. And I said, well, Keen, let's organize this. How did Procter & Gamble teach you to do this? I've got notebooks, I've kept them, notebooks of all those statements that would come and all of the, this is not a bill, explanation of benefits that would come. And I said, I'm going to organize this so if any question ever comes up, I can turn to the right day and ask the question. And occasionally a question would come up. And I could say, no, on this day my records show that this is what I did and this is what it cost. I work for the Fayette County Public Schools. Through the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we have health care insurance. The people who I've had to ask questions about have always answered the questions. They've been very helpful. The insurance has been quite substantial, and the expenses are quite substantial. But I'm very appreciative, and I've told the people who have answered my questions about insurance that I appreciate their time, their expertise, and their compassion.
Laura, Ken, I want you to introduce your family, other people that are here. We didn't do that earlier.
Aw. My sweet husband of 34 years, Bob. Stand up, Bob.
Please stand up.
Bob is Keen's older brother. Stand up, Bob, so they can see you. And my baby boy, Brian. Brian, stand up. Brian is in from Furman University. He's a sophomore. Julie is at Vanderbilt, senior. She's back at school. And then our oldest, Robert, is in Singapore. So, and then some of his friends from school are also here.
So what we're going to do right now is anyone who wants to get their books, if you have not purchased a book, you can outside as a hope. And if you want to get it signed, come across the stage. And now there are no steps over there. We were warned about that earlier. You just can't, this isn't like high school graduation where you just keep on going. And we found this out. And so you turn back around and come back that way. But we'll go ahead and do that for anyone who wants to come up and say hello or get their book signed. But thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
Good job.
Thank you for being here.
We did it once before, right?
Terrific. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Appreciate it.